Stonehenge exists here in the Hades Desert, or maybe it's Hades Desert, one of those two. And that desert is located in San Salvation. And one more important event from 1998, the country of Yuktobania, they create something called Project Alicorn. That's all I'm going to say about that. Now, in 1999, a Ulysses asteroid passed Earth's Roche limit, and some of the fragments impacted Earth. Stonehenge successfully destroyed some of the fragments, but did not completely protect Usea. So now the aftermath. In the continent of Usea, 500,000 people die in the first 2 weeks, and thousands become displaced refugees. Many countries, including the Federation of Central Usea, began discussing refugee acceptance policies. The FCU asked Erusia for assistance in handling the refugees since it was a continental power. However, Erusia was hit hard, so it stopped accepting migrants and closed down its borders. It begins to send migrants to camps that are full of disease and crime. And as a result, other Usean countries impose economic sanctions on Erusia. Going back to Ameria, the country is barely affected through the prolific use of underground shelters. Fuck some sea! In Estovakia, they created their own railgun called Chandelier. Due to the limited time frame and Chandelier's complex design, the railgun was not completed in time to protect Estovakia from the asteroid fragments. As a result, Estovakia suffers considerable human loss and is driven into a state of economic collapse. Estovakia ultimately finishes building Chandelier in 2014. However, it's destroyed in 2016 during the events of Ace Combat 6. Many of the Ulysses fragments were stuck in the atmosphere. Yuktobani and Ozia both wanted to clean up the atmosphere, so they joined forces to move forward with Ozia's original maneuverable orbiting spacecraft base design, and created what's called the Arcbird in 1999 as a solution for collecting space junk. Alright, so finally out of the 90s into the 2000s. So the entire world was impacted by the Ulysses asteroid. There's people falling into economic collapse. Some people are better off than others. And there is a shit ton of refugees, in particular on the Usean continent. However, first we're going to focus on, I forgot what this continent is called, but basically, what the fuck happened to the mouse? Hello? Mouse! What the fuck? Okay, there we go. We're going to focus here on this whole thing, by the way, is a continent. So, Kesset Island, Ameria, Estovakia, and Nordnovik. This is all one continent. I just can't remember the name of it. Anyway, we're focusing on Ameria and Estovakia right now. So, in 2000, Ameria starts sending aid to Estovakia to help it rebuild. But during this time, the Estovakian government loses control to regional factions. The factions plunder the aid, resulting in halted recovery from the asteroid. This leads Ameria to stop sending aid. They're like, alright, well, this isn't helping. You're just literally wasting our money. So like, we're gonna stop for now. It doesn't mean that we'll stop forever, but like, you gotta figure your shit out. That being said though, in March 20th of 2002, Ozia, Ameria, and some other countries impose economic sanctions on Estovakia because they're noticing some internal corruption in their quote-unquote government. Now, with all that tension building up there, we're now in 2003. Erusia pulls a Belka and says, fuck you guys, Usea. So remember, Erusia is still under economic sanction. They were hit hard by the asteroids, and they're dealing with all this tension from the rest of the entire continent. So in 2003, Erusia fucking snaps. I'm not. At some point, they gain this land. Let's just say they have it now. I can't remember. They get it. This is theirs eventually. But anyway, they invade this country, San Salvation, and they take control of Stonehenge. The FCU issued an ultimatum for Erusia to withdraw from San Salvation, but Erusia would not comply. This led to a coalition of Usean countries united against Erusia called ISAF, which stands for Independent States Allied Forces. Erusia weaponized Stonehenge and immediately attacked ISAF on all fronts, forcing them to the most eastern parts of the continent. So this was all ISAF, and they start moving on Erusia and San Salvation. Erusia says, we got railguns, motherfucker, and they just started blasting. Bang! Wow.
Well, I don't see so good, so I missed. Then they ran away. I ran after them.
Okay.
Bang! Tried to shoot him in the back. But I don't run so good either. Anyway.
So that was all happening in 2003. 2004, Vincent Harling becomes president of Osea. I guess another notable fact about Harling becoming president of Osea is his presidency also further heightened peace and cooperation between Osea and Yuktobania. So now we can go back to Osea and now the year's 2005. So Arugia backed the ISAF up to the most eastern parts of the continent. However, the ISAF was not taken down, so there was still fighting going on. In Ace Combat 4, ISAF is able to fight back and reclaim the continent from Arugian control, so they start marching back westward. ISAF was able to capture the Arugian capital of Farbanti and install the new government. So, sorry, I just realized I forgot an important part. I don't think Arusia was a republic up until this point. All up until this point, Arugia was a kingdom. It was the kingdom of Arugia. They're a monarchy. ISAF installed their government, and then I think the royal family still existed, but they didn't have any power. And Arugia became the Federal Republic of Arusia. What's notable is that the installation of this new government is what marked the end of the Continental War. However, although the war is technically over, there is an insurrection started by young Arugian officers who did not accept the outcome of the war. They took control of an Arugian superweapon called Megalith, which could launch ICBMs and weaponize the orbiting asteroid fragments. 7 days later, however, Megalith is destroyed by ISAF, and they form an autonomous government within Arusia. This government wasn't popular with different members of the Arugian military, which led to them forming their own secret group called the Free Arugians. The Free Arugians want to regain independence from ISAF. In 2006, 1 year after the end of the Continental War, the Free Arugians attack ISAF across the continent, and they are deemed a terrorist group. Surprise. This rebellion is stopped by a pilot known as Mobius 1, who you play as in Ace Combat 4. In the arcade mode of Ace Combat 5, you play as Mobius 1 again to end the Free Arugian uprising. So after the uprising, ISAF was able to tighten the control of Arugia, as well as obtain some advanced Arugian UAVs. So now it's 2007, and we head back over to Ameria and Estovakia. Oh, our good friends doing. So now it's 2007. In Estovakia, the factions are still fighting for power. Out of the 5 main factions, the Lees United Front took control of the capital. Ameria partnered with the LUF to resume sending aid to the country. However, the LUF purposefully diverted aid from the city of Gladina in an attempt to suppress opposition. This attempt to suppress opposition directly results in 200,000 citizens dying. Another faction called the Eastern Faction recruited mercenaries from Belkan and North Osea to expand their weapons development. This leads to the official start of the Estovakian Civil War between the main 5 factions. In 2008, Harling wins a second term in Osea, receiving over 4 million more votes than he received the first time in 2004. By 2008, the Arcbird had cleared up over 80% of the atmosphere's debris, and it had become a worldwide symbol of peace. To that end, the Arcbird became the host of the G7 Summit in 2008. In 2010, the Civil War and the LUF's behavior causes Ameria to discontinue their aid to Estovakia. Also in 2010, Yuktobanian warmongers have a silent coup against their prime minister. It's believed they're influenced by the Grey Men. In September, Osea's airspace along the west coast was penetrated by unidentified aircraft, and Osea sent aircraft to intercept them. This happened multiple times until Yuktobania declared war on Osea by launching a surprise attack. This war is the Circum-Pacific War, aka the Belkan conflict, because Belka. Despite being called the Circum-Pacific War, it was actually fought across the Saris Ocean. Fun fact, I guess, I don't know. So now back in Ace Combat 5, it was determined that Osea was also the victim of a secret coup influenced by the Grey Men. Harling was secretly sent to have peace talks with Yuktobania. While en route, Yuktobanians attempt to shoot down his transport plane called Mother Goose 1. His plane is instead damaged by friendly SAM fire. An emergency landing is made, but he ends up getting kidnapped. In his absence, the vice president is in charge. Both government leaders thought they could easily crush the other due to their superweapons. The Sinfaxi and Rinfaxi submarines that Yuktobania had versus Ozia's now weaponized Arkberg. Ace Combat 5 is really long, but after some crazy events and creating probably the coolest squadron of all time, thanks to President Harling, Ozia fends off Yuktobania, then decides, fuck it, we might as well invade. So they do. The fighting would have continued, but Ozian military personnel uncovered the Grey Men's plots and exposed it to the public. So now the Grey Men are no longer conspiracy, they are deemed legit. In December, Yuktobania and Ozia signed a peace treaty and teamed up against the Grey Men, who were planning on carrying out nuclear attacks on civilian targets because they wanted to intensify the hatred between Ozia and Yuktobania. The Grey Men's plots were stopped, and Yuktobania and Ozia, both now having severely weakened militaries, re-established their friendly relationship. The Grey Men are still at large, however, and are still operating Grunder Industries out of North Ozia. So now, moving on to 2012, if you remember that thing earlier called the Alicorn, it became scrap. Yuktobania scrapped the Alicorn, and Aruzia purchased the scrap metal via a private company called GR Trading. GR Trading is related to a company called General Resource, which is one of the main factions you play as in Ace Combat 3. That game takes place in the future where companies hold more power than the governments and they have their own private militaries. In Ace Combat 3, there is a character named Eric Jaeger, and in Ace Combat 7, you also meet a character with the last name Jaeger. The Jaeger you meet in Ace Combat 7 is Eric Jaeger's father. Just some continuity there for you. So in Ace Combat 7, you'll notice Jaeger mentions about how he can't wait to tell his son about the positive things he's doing to end the war. But yeah, so that's that. And also, in that same year, 2012, Aruzia fully restores the Alicorn. So, continuing with our semi-chronological order, because I realized I jumped around a little bit. My bad. The Eastern faction in Estovakia wins the Estovakian Civil War thanks to their advanced technology and mercenaries. Shout out to Belkan. As a result of this long-ass fighting, Estovakia now has very experienced troops and advanced technology. A lot of military personnel also dislike Ameria because their aid was used to finance some of the other factions, although that was not Ameria's intentions. Back in Ozia, Ozia is now mainly interested in promoting peace across the world, and decided to have a major part in building a space elevator that is planned to be located on the continent of Ozia. In particular, somewhere around here. President Harling wants to put so much effort into the space elevator here because he believes it will help stabilize the region. During construction of the space elevator, Ozia is gaining influence on the continent of Ozia because of its military presence. There is now a group called the International Union Peacekeeping Forces, aka the IUN, that was developed in Ozia and absorbed ISAF into it. And that's the last significant event of 2013. In 2014, the Free Regions rebelled again and attacked IUN bases. However, in the VR mode of Ace Combat 7, Mobius 1, along with other squadrons, are deployed to defeat them once again. Apparently these attacks were only a diversion though, but no one knows what the true motives were. Moving along in 2015, back in Estovakia, by this point there have been government assassination attempts, anti-humanitarian raids, and just a festering hate of Ameria. But with all this, believe it or not, Estovakia was still unstable. Estovakia sought out revenge on Ameria by launching a surprise attack and starting the Ameria-Estovakia War. In Ace Combat 6, you experience the overwhelming surprise attack from the side of the Amarians. Estovakia manages to take the capital of Grace Maria and eventually push the Amarians all the way back to the west coast of their most western territory, so all the way to the western coast of Kesset Island. In 2016, the Amarians are able to devise a counterattack and eventually retake Grace Maria and push the Estovakians, or Stovies, back into Estovakia. The Stovey military was falling apart. They even desperately made failed attempts at killing civilians and planned to unleash chemical weapons on Ameria. Ameria, however, signs a peace treaty with Estovakia instead of invading them. The same night that the peace treaty was signed, Estovakia uses Chandelier to launch cruise missiles in combination with deploying stealth fighters to attack Grace Maria. Ameria fends them off, then goes on a mission to destroy Chandelier the next morning. Estovakia currently remains a war-torn country. In other news, the Alicorn at Arusia restored sank to the bottom of the ocean with over 300 people on board. I'm not laughing. Now we get to 2019, and 2019 is the year where the events of Ace Combat 7 start to unfold. So, beginning in 2019, a country called Lasath had been having an ongoing civil war between the people and the military. There is no information when the war started, but it did end in 2019. It is believed that this civil war was the way for the Lasathian defense industry to increase sales because of the members of the Lasathian military who are also stakeholders of the Lasathian military complex. That was hard to say. Basically, people profit off of war. The Civil War did result in the advancement of Lasathian military technology and gained war experience, but the conspiracy is unconfirmed. The neighboring country of Aurelia was providing aid to Lasath during this time, but just like in the case of Ameria and Estovakia, the aid did not end up getting to the citizens of Lasath. Back in the continent of Arusia is once more ruled by its royal family instead of the ISAF government. Members of the Arusian military who may secretly be free Arusians convinced the royal family that the space elevator was nothing more than a plot by Ozia to gain more influence and control the region. And that's where we start Ace Combat 7.